Testing, testing. Well, we're back.
Yay.
After a long hiatus, we're back. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing okay. By the way, this is my wife again. What's your name?
Karita Bledsoe.
Karita Bledsoe. I like the sound of that. You know what we're talking about today?
Negative mindsets.
Negative mindsets. I would agree.
Negativity bias.
Negativity bias. By the way, I kind of told her about what we're going to be talking about before we even started this, so it's no surprise that she knows. Yeah, didn't take much work, but it is 9:00, and
you took a nap. I did not.
That's very true.
And we both work tomorrow.
Very true. And I have to get up early because I have a conference call. But, you know.
So it's the perfect time to do this.
It is, yeah. Long awaited. It's about that time. So we can get started. I don't think it's going to be an hour.
Oh, we'll see. It
We'll
probably
see.
will be.
We'll
Just
see,
get
we'll
started. Wait till we get going.
Yeah. I want to say this podcast is not going to be about the part 2 of the funeral of my mom, but I wanted to switch things up. I was having a conversation with one of my associates at work. Great girl. I'm not going to put her on blast, but I am going to put her on blast. We'll call her Bailey. Bailey.
Hey, Bailey.
Yeah. That way, if she ever hears this, she won't sue because
She'll still sue.
well, hopefully not. You know, she is becoming a lawyer.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I'm telling all her business, so she probably knows this about her.
Narrows it down.
This literally narrows it down. All of these are lies. These are all alleged things. But we were having a conversation about expectations, and one of the things that came up was my ability to be optimistic in any circumstance. And she was kind of alluding to it being to a fault. And I was just kind of saying it's a shame that you are jaded about life at your age, because she's in her early 20s. And one of the things she's told me was expect the worst from people and be surprised when it does not happen. And I was just like, wow, who hurt you? But it was just very surprising that she had that perspective on life at her young age, being that she's going to be someone that is so influential in her career choice. She has to be optimistic about the cases she takes. I was just like, wow. I was just very interested. And I told her I was actually going to bring this to the podcast. So she shouldn't be surprised. And maybe I'll send a screenshot of the topic so she could have a blast with that. But I wanted to bring my wife in on this to kind of just hear her perspectives on it as well. So I would say that that statement touches on psychological concepts related to expectation management, negative bias, and even self-fulfilling prophecies, you know? Like what you believe about yourself versus, like, do you believe in destiny or do you believe it can be changed, right? And I guess the first thing that we're going to talk about is a negativity bias. The brain is wired to focus on negative possibilities for survival. Wife, how does this influence our perceptions of others?
It makes them seem worse than they actually are, I think. And this is coming from someone who has had and is still recovering from negativity bias.
Interesting. Like, I don't know where to go with that, you know, because my goal of this podcast is not to solo you out and
Please.
kind of...
I mean, it's your podcast, I guess. I'm supportive in any way I can be.
Wow. But
I can be today's case study. But when you brought it up, I was shocked that you said it came from your coworker, Bailey. Bailey?
Bailey. That is her name.
And all I could think about was this was pretty much the topic of the final therapy session we had right before we got married, where I was really concerned about some stuff. And I was thinking like, oh, this is where the therapist is going to tell Murray, like, yeah, he needs to straighten up so I won't be so scared to get married. And it totally shifted. And she was like, Karita, you need to work on your mindset. And I was like, what the heck? No, that's not the problem here.
Wow.
That will forever be stained in my mind because I didn't think that was the issue.
Wow. Like, so how did you handle that from there on out? Did you take your counselor's advice?
Yeah, she gave me 2 authors. I only remember one, Daniel Amen. But Daniel Amen had that 30-day journey to happiness, and he also has a ton of books. And he actually has a YouTube channel. Both guys had YouTube channels. So I listened to different stuff in their YouTube channels, and I checked out books from each of them on Hoopla. But the Daniel Amen had the 30 days to happiness, and I never completed the 30 days. It's in that white binder over there. But I remember the first day, one of the first days, it said that you needed to start every single day by saying, today's going to be a great day. And I was like, what difference is that going to make? And he even says, like, you may think this is going to make much of a difference, but it made a huge difference. And sometimes little stuff, like when we're arguing, just saying, I still love you, or like, you actually asked me to, I hope I can share this because it's a couple of podcasts, right? I don't know.
Yeah,
but anyways, you've actually asked me to say, like, everything's going to be okay. Even if there's something that I'm bringing up that I think is, like, bad or wrong, still just reminding myself and us that everything is going to be okay. Little things like that can make a huge impact on your mindset on things.
Yeah. Man, I wish I had more to say. I mean, I think the conversation that I was having with Bailey kind of just, it highlighted how optimistic I am, right? And how much I lean into optimism. And I really do feel like at times I'd rather, for instance, I'd rather me be nice and expect a good return in 100 people and maybe get 3 of those people to be good, rather than expecting the worst out of people and wanting 3 of those people to be good. Even though you get the same result, I think a negative mindset shapes, eventually I feel like in a way, because you have a negative mindset, if you only get 3, then sometimes it may feel like, okay, well, maybe I'll only get 2 next time. But it's honestly that image of a glass half full and half empty, right? I feel like if you constantly think the glass is half full, then the possibility of it filling up is just greater. And every time you get that extra 1, it's going to feel good. But let's say you have 3, and you get that extra 1, it's just like, oh, that's cool. But what is that really doing to your psyche if you're constantly thinking just negativity all the time, right?
But I think the beauty of it, or the beauty of people, is we never call it negativity bias or what it actually is. We justify it. Like, I've just been hurt, so I just have a wall up. But really, you're just negative. Or I just don't really trust people. But really, you're just negative. Like, we find reasons to justify it, but we never really deal with the actual issue, which is negativity bias.
For sure.
And I think just like with AA, the first step is recognizing you have a problem. If you're spending so much time justifying it, it probably won't be fixed.
Yeah, and that brings up the next point as far as cognitive distortions. I know at times we could, there's this thing called catastrophizing, right? Which is where you're assuming the worst from people. Man, that, for me, I don't know. I think having that perspective can just lead to more wrong thinking. And it's just like you're digging deeper into something that's harder to get out of. Rather than just having a better mindset whenever you can, you know.
But even, again, because I've experienced all these things, I really think this is about me, but whatever. It's about Bailey. But I think that I, in the past, have justified this by saying, no, I'm not being negative. I'm just preparing for the worst. Like, there's been times when we were about to enter situations where we were going to an event with someone that I didn't particularly want to see. And I would literally tell you about different things that could happen in a worst case scenario. I love talking about worst case scenarios. But I don't think of that as a negativity bias. I just think of it as preparation.
Yeah, but let's say you expect the best and the best happens, right? Because I believe in both of these things. The things that you notice the most find you. It's the whole concept of confirmation bias, right? The more the things you focus on the most, the more you see those things. It's kind of like, punch buggy, the whole little thing that people used to do.
Yeah.
Like, the more and more you think about it, the more and more you start spotting things in your life. So why not spot more of the good? Do we not think you're going to see more good if you do that?
I think when you have a negativity bias, that's harder to do.
Why?
Because you don't really, your natural instinct, just like we were talking about before, your natural instinct is to think like, oh my gosh, this good thing is going to happen, this good thing is going to happen. It's just so easy to think of ways that things can go terribly wrong.
Yeah.
It's very simple.
It is very simple. But even thinking into it, do you want to reinforce distrust in people?
No, I don't. The answer, but I get what you're saying.
I mean, so if you don't, do you feel like having a negative perspective is going to do the opposite of enforcing distrust?
Say that again?
If you're having a negative expectation and you're using confirmation bias to do so, do you think enforcing distrust is going to produce a positive outcome?
No. Even though two negatives do make a positive, don't they? In that math?
Yes,
So,
that is true.
maybe.
We'll let the audience decide on that one.
No, I get what you're saying. And honestly, like we've talked about how we get to shape how our family is going to be. When we have children, and let's say they have a talent show, I don't want them thinking about their voice cracking or them falling off the stage. I want to be able to go through scenarios of like, everyone's going to stand up and like say bravo and ask you to sing the song again, or like you're going to have to give a standing, like you're going to have a standing ovation, or just think of more positive things. I would definitely want to implement that in my family and with my children more than, the negative things that I currently do.
For sure. And I think I'm coming from the stance of, even if we hope the best and then our child's voice does crack, then we could say, okay, that did happen, but let's try to work on it and try to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
Right. And we'll keep doing that. Right. I think just reinforcing positive behaviors is gonna prove beneficial in the end. Right. Even with just relationships that our children have, romantically or even just friendships, you know. Because I think it's very quick to cut someone off when they don't. If you're having a negative perspective, it's very easy to cut someone off once they just don't do the right thing. But that's so weird because everyone doesn't do the right thing all the time.
Yeah.
Right. Man, that kind of hints on the whole idea of self-fulfilling prophecy as well, because I'll ask you a question. Do you believe that people create their destiny, or you make your own destiny?
Those are my only two options.
Or if you're Neo in the Matrix
I feel like we kind of discussed this when we were doing the whole deep dive into free will, because that was pretty much essentially what that whole thing was about. I think that God creates our destiny. However, I believe the decisions that we make lead us to the destiny that God ultimately had in mind for us. Is that an option?
I believe that could be an option, yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's what I think.
Say that one more time for the people in the
Oh
back.
gosh, okay. I think that God creates our destiny, but I think that our decisions that we make ultimately lead us to the destiny that God created for us.
Can you give an example?
An example of a destiny, like,
Like, so are you saying God knows inevitably where we're going to go, but we have a choice to steal something or to walk past it. If we choose to steal something, that decision we make, God already knew we were going to make that decision. But you're also saying if we choose to not steal something, God also knew that that was the decision that we're going to make.
yeah.
Okay.
And I don't think, like in that scenario, I don't think that the paths are so far apart as we think. Like if you steal something,
It's a
you're going to
split
jail.
decision, yeah.
If you steal something, you're going to jail for the rest of your life. That's your path now. Or if you don't steal something, you're going to be the pastor of a megachurch. I don't think they're that different.
It's like chance after chance after chance.
I think you
Okay.
can steal something one time, steal something a second time, but still make a right choice another time just to ultimately end up where God wanted you to be in the first place.
So there's like room for
For
mistakes.
sure, yeah.
Do you feel that God is more of an optimistic person?
Absolutely.
So why do we
I think
as humans?
is the ultimate goal. I think that's our problem as humans, and with sin is our natural instinct, like it was talking about negativity bias, how that's so natural. It's natural because it's not of God.
How do we reverse out of that?
Like everything else that isn't of God, that is natural. You have to discipline yourself and train yourself to do the opposite.
Do you feel like you've trained yourself to do that?
No, I'm getting better, but I have not. No, not even gonna lie.
How do you get someone else to see that it's possible to do the opposite?
Sometimes you can't, but sometimes just seeing the fruits of your labor can cause change.
Yeah.
Like if people, especially people who are always negative, if they see how good life can be, being more positive, it might cause them to just not want that life anymore.
Yeah.
It's kind of the whole purpose of the Christian life. The goal is to live a life that's just so appealing that it's not, I want to get you to heaven, which is what people try to say every day to get people to become Christian. But ultimately, life with Christ is better than life without him.
I agree. And even to add to that, I had a thought today about how do you know someone is Christian? And my thing was you can't really know someone is Christian by asking them if they are
Yeah.
or assuming they are. You kind of know someone's Christian by relationship because that will show you the fruit of what their relationship with God is. And I think the people that are Christian are just on that journey, Oh, man. So, I mean, to take it a little bit further, there's this thing like this diametrically opposed idea of defensive pessimism versus optimistic outlook. I think we've already established that God probably has more of an optimistic outlook, which is so funny because if you look all throughout Scripture, there's things that humans do all the time to mess it up, but there's always a ram in the bush in a way to be able to just kind of save the day, and that just shows how God's optimism is always there, and it just shows that there's always something that's going to save you in a way, as long as you trust.
And I think it's so funny, just kind of going off what you're saying. I think that it's so funny how things can be so twisted because other religions are very optimistic. Like Buddhists are super optimistic. Hindus are very optimistic. But they're optimistic in not what God wants us to be optimistic in. And even as a Christian, I don't think we're supposed to think like, I can do this, I'm the best, that type of mindset. But like you're saying, I can't do this. But I pray that the Lord provide a ram. Like, our optimism's in God, not in ourselves.
Right. Like, some people believe, like, preparing for the worst reduces disappointment, right?
I do. I'm trying not to, but I do.
What are some of the ways that you've prepared for the worst and it really did help with disappointment? Like, genuinely helped, or did it just make you feel sad? Was it like a false sense of preparedness, or did you actually feel prepared for it?
It's a great question. Dang. I think I was going to be sadder either way, but I will admit that preparing for the worst made me sadder. Because the way I prepare for the worst, because I am quite negative, it's never as bad as what I prepared in my mind. It never has been.
Yeah. Wow. So what's the point?
I get it. I get your logic. I'm just saying that it's not that simple to stop.
Man. So, I mean, so when it comes to, we'll switch it up a little bit. When it comes to trust and cynicism, like, in a way, these are words that could be, like, defensive pessimism could be viewed as cynicism, and optimistic outlook can be seen as trust, right? Now, when you're dealing with trust versus cynicism, why is it so easy to be a skeptic, or to have cynicism versus trusting?
Because everybody else is doing it. Like, the odds of having a group of people around you that are super optimistic is slim to none.
Right.
People bond on, like, people don't bond at work about how, like, man, isn't the pay here great? Don't they treat us so well here? People bond on the negative things about their jobs. Like, it is the human way.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to optimistic outlook, and you look at scriptures, when God is saying, be set apart, and if we kind of understand optimistic outlook could be interchangeable with trust, what does being set apart look like to you if you're using those words synonymously with being set apart, which is optimistic outlook and trust? What is, if you're looking at being set apart, what does that look like in everyday life for you?
You're not going to look like everyone else. You're going to, pretty much like you said, you're going to stand out like a sore thumb. And I think it might make things difficult. And you're going to be criticized about things where you're like, how could you be critical of this? I want to say, correct me if I'm wrong, is it the term toxic positivity a thing now?
It's crazy, right?
That is insane.
Yeah.
How can positivity? That's an oxymoron if I ever heard
How
one.
Could positivity be toxic?
Yeah.
You know.
But it's like you're too positive. You need to tone it down. Like, we put a negative label on something that is very positive.
And I think the world can go two ways. If we continuously look at things negatively, there's going to be more negative things that we see. But if there's just little seeds planted of positivity, it's going to be viewed as toxic.
Yeah.
But then the fruits of that, when it comes to just the relationship you have with God, and the relationships that you have horizontally with people, people are going to look at you crazy when you're kind, when you're nice. But I think those people are here for a purpose, right? You have to be positive, otherwise this world will be really dim, even more dim for the people that are more cynics, right? So yeah, what are some ways that, like, even in work, that you could be more trusting, if that is the being set apart?
More trusting.
Yeah.
Just going into meetings with a better mindset, like, not thinking like, oh crap, here we go again, but being like Christ, honestly.
For sure.
Which is hard sometimes, which is crazy. Sometimes it's hard to imagine that because we don't really know God as well as we think we do.
Very true. Very true. Very true. I'm just going to keep saying it, but Very true. No, I'm just playing.
Very true.
Very true.
Yeah.
How does that speak to resilience in your life?
How does what speak to resilience?
If we understand that being set apart is trusting and having a more optimistic outlook, how does that correlate to resilience, and why do you believe that is like equals resilience? Being able to see negativity but choosing to be positive, and what does that look like in your life?
I think that's pretty much the story of Christ. Like, he didn't want to get crucified, but he understood that was the cup that was before him.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it wasn't taken away from him. And even though he was crucified, he was resilient and rose again. And I think the life of Christ reflects the life of the Christian. Like, we're going to be persecuted. You're going to be positive and optimistic, or hopefully will be. And you'll be labeled as toxic positivity or something, but ultimately you're doing exactly what God wants, and that beats doing what the world labels you as.
Yeah, and I mean, all of us have to kind of, in a way, manage your expectations, but when managing expectations can be a coping strategy, but when does it become a barrier to personal growth and connections? When is deciding to cope limiting you?
I think when you remember when you used to, like in our arguments, you used to tell me something which I thought was so crazy. Look outside yourself. And I think in that same vein, like when we see people how we see them and not how God sees them, that's when we limit ourselves. Like, I know you're going to be late because you're always late. Every time we met up, you're always late. But when God looks at that person, he sees like the reasons that they're late, the why behind their late, like the whole background of it. And we just kind of limit it to what we see with our own eyes.
Or what we felt from that moment.
Yeah, what we felt.
Yeah. Yeah, I did used to say that a lot. And in a way, I still feel that, which is why it's so hard for me to, sometimes when people ask me questions and they're just looking for a black and white answer, I'm just like, but there's more to it, you know?
It was so funny when, this is a aside, but still for the podcast, when my dad called me the other day, or when I spoke to my dad the other day, he was asking me a question and had like 3 different options. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is such a Murray answer, but all of them. And I've never answered a question with all the answers. But that's pretty much how you answer every question.
It's because it's really that way. And I think it comes from I've taken a couple psychological or psych courses and even just did a bit of research on, emotional intelligence and just how to process things. And all of it comes down to just perspective and how much we don't know. So it's very hard for me to answer questions in a way of me knowing that I'm only answering that black and whitely, because of my experience. But there's so much in the world that I have not experienced. And because of it, I'm always throwing in that gray area or the nuance of things. Which is why a lot of the time I would say, think outside of yourself. Because there's so much that we don't know. Man. I mean, the last thing I wanted to talk about is cultural and social influences and why we may be more skeptical or why we may be more optimistic. And my story is a little different because there's tons of reasons why I should be more skeptical about lots of things.
And I have less reasons, but I'm more skeptical than you.
Yeah. And I think through my relationship with God, it showed me how much I don't deserve and how much I've gotten just from knowing who God is. So because of that hope and because of what God has given me, I'm more open to the possibility that people could change because I've been changed,
This is song.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Will they do the...
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely remember that song. But yeah, I definitely have tons of reasons to just give up. But I've just been given so many chances. Like, there was things that I didn't even tell you at the beginning of our relationship as far, well, you know now, as far as me. You do.
I'm still learning stuff.
Man, because I remember when we first met, I had to sleep in a garage on a floor
Yeah.
that had no AC. And I had to really contemplate on, like, man, should I live in my car and just have a gym membership or tough this out and get my apartment? And I think I chose the more optimistic route because the other alternative would suck. If I had no hope, I would probably be homeless right now. But I just kept on hoping for the better thing. And the better thing kept coming to me. The worst thing still came to me too. Like, I lost my car. I had car trouble to this day, right? But the better things always keep coming. I could choose to see the worst, but somehow, some way, because I'm choosing the positive comes.
That's one of the things you're definitely much better at me than, is remaining positive even when the negative does show up. Like, it's very easy to remain positive when things are just going positively. But when the negative shows up, and to stay positive, it's just like, what the heck are you doing? Like, things are bad right now.
Yeah. It's something about, is that experience coming from the bottom, you know, where no one expected you to be who you are, but you are in spite of. And because of that perspective, you just continuously get more, you know, more bass in your voice, more hair on your chest, you know,
Beautiful.
and your back gets a little bit straighter, and your confidence is a lot higher, and your optimism is a lot more bright because you know where you came from. And it's one of those things to where the same people that come from where I come from, kind of, they understand it. But I'll even put a caveat. The people that come from where I'm from and choose to do the opposite thing that people didn't think they could do, right? And choosing that path and continuously choosing that path. If you get it, you get it. And if you know, you know, you know? So, yeah. Does upbringing or society shape whether we expect the worst? And how does that, like, whatever your answer is, what are some ways that was reflected in your upbringing, and even to the things that you brought into the marriage or even in life in general?
I was raised by a single mother. So yes, is the answer to the question. Yes, I think it affected me. Because I only had that mother's perspective in my life growing up. So I live my life very cautiously. I don't have that dad perspective of, you can do it. Like, what are you scared of? I don't really have that. I hear it from you, but to me, that's not natural, and that's not something that I grew up with at all. For example, 2 examples that come to mind. One, we were having the discussion about our child wearing a helmet because I only have my mom's voice, and I only have, like, her stories of deaths and brain stuff that happened to people because they didn't wear a helmet. That's where my mind goes. But you're just like, once you're 13, you don't need a helmet. I'm like, where is the logic in that? But I get that is very much a dad mentality. Or you're training for your first 5K. Has that been mentioned on the podcast yet?
No.
Very excited about that. But you're training for your first 5K. You went running. We went at night too, which was so weird. But I get you wanted to go when it was cooler, and it was much cooler that night. But you went to run, and I was walking. And because we were walking at night, all I could think about was all the different ways I could be murdered in that moment. And you weren't there because you were running and I was walking. And I was just thinking about, like, man, yeah, having a single mom definitely shapes what I'm scared of and what I'm not scared of. And having, in particular, my single mother.
Yeah. I'll tell
She's
you
one
what.
of a kind.
Yeah, she is definitely one of the kind. Hey, Cynth, if you ever listen to this.
Why are we saying her name, but not Bailey?
Oh, Bent. But that same night, there was a couple things that I did to kind of be more optimistic.
Mm-hmm.
After I left you, I looked around and I
Mm-hmm.
saw how that could be scary.
Mm-hmm.
My first instinct was to pray for your safety.
Mm-hmm.
And after I did that, instead of being less optimistic,
Mm-hmm.
less pessimistic,
Uh-huh.
instead of being more pessimistic, I should say, I prayed about it. I trusted God for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I physically looked around. Like the ways that you walked,
Mm-hmm.
I was going before you, making
Yeah.
sure that's okay,
Mm-hmm.
right? And in my mind, what I was doing optimistically was making sure I hit my destination and make sure I would come back fast enough to make sure you're okay.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Which you did.
which I did, yeah. So there was just certain things I did during my run to just try to make sure you're okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a testament of like how at all times from God we can be covered, right?
Yeah, I saw that connection too. You see
Yeah.
how he
Like-
basically goes before us. And everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like so at all times we're covered by God.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, like I instantly get more relief in knowing that you're going to be okay, I'm going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that kicks my pessimism to the side
Mm-hmm.
whenever I'm putting my trust in God.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be very hard sometimes.
Yeah.
Mainly because when you're in a relationship, when you're in a marriage, you start to see the things that freak people out.
Yeah.
But in spite of the freak out, I'm very proud that, or dignified. I'm very dignified in my, in the wife I chose, and knowing that my faith, she's gonna be okay. Right?
And it's so funny to that point. It's so funny how God works where the things that freak you out aren't the things that freak me out,
Mhm.
and vice versa. We're
Yeah.
freaked out by totally opposite
For
things.
sure. But yeah. Well,
It's a good one.
this is a good one. It's a little bit shorter because it's bedtime. We got to work tomorrow. So, that being said, podcast, we are out, and let's keep growing together. Any last words?
Proud of you for recording this.
Appreciate it. Shanks. All right. Bye, y'all.
Bye.